High intensity, low volume training is a time proven method. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. And yes, I am fully aware this is one of the biggest arguments and conflicts that has raged through the bodybuilding world for generations. Okay, and I need to be clear, this is a massive debate that started all the way in the 1980s. There was actually some of it even way before that was stuff they debated and looked at, even in the 50s, but it was never spelled out the way that it was in the 80s due to Menzer and all that stuff coming out and its heavy duty methods. And here's the thing, guys. Champion bodybuilders of both enhanced and natural varieties have been the best in the world using both approaches, so where they do really high volume or the high intensity lower volume. But the point I'm going to make here, I don't think that it comes down to genetics to the same degree that people does. I think it comes down to effort and willing to work. And this is something I've observed over the years because I've seen people who, when they try the lower volume, if they don't get results, it's because you watch them train. They are simply not training hard enough. Right? And here is the way that this has worked over the years. Because all the studies that have ever looked at it all found muscle growth on it. In other words, there are numerous studies over the years where only 5 or 6 sets were used per week in a muscle, and people saw robust growth. And to my knowledge, almost all the studies that have looked at that, when people were training hard or they were having them train to failure, like what the researchers described as failure, every single one of the test subjects gained muscle in those studies. And it never seemed to be, oh, well, some people do and some people didn't. Well, no, if the researchers were there making sure they actually did hard sets, they all gained it. And those have been studies on novices and even trained lifters. Okay? So we need to be clear on that. It is not some arbitrary thing to where it hasn't been documented and noted. That everyone pretty much, when they're observed and they do it right, they gain muscle. They gain measurable amounts of muscle, and it tends to be pretty good muscle. So again, we need to be very clear on this. Anyone who's saying, well, it doesn't work for me, then how come that's not been found in the data? If it doesn't work for you, it's because you were simply not training hard enough. And the point I'm going to make here is that that's this style of training, again, higher intensity, meaning slightly heavier weights, of course, too, with good form, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, if we're going to do lower volume with high intensity, that also means the reps are probably not crazy high, at least on most of the work. I'm not saying there can't be a little bit in there, because again, the whole idea here is mitigating volume. And what we find is that it simply enhances recovery, okay? The people who train in this manner, even if they're doing sets to failure, 6 to 8 reps or whatever to failure, as a general rule, tend to not feel under recovered. The recovery is better, okay? And that is a point that has to be made, right? They don't have the same degree of exhaustion you see from the really high volumes of training, because we have to remember really high volumes of training is actually where we get nervous system fatigue. So when people talk about things like CNS fatigue, that doesn't happen from heavy lifting. That's been documented in the lab, not to a significant degree, but really high rep, high volume training does cause it to a far more measurable extent. Again, repeatedly noted. So that's why that style of training makes people feel tired and sluggish. There is a nervous system fatigue component to it. And it's very real, very measurable. Okay, so you have that, and then we come down to the time commitment. At the end of the day, not everyone wants to live in the gym. So this is the argument then that people make with this stuff is, well, okay, but that could compromise my gains. And you see that all the time. I don't have the time to commit to the gym. Right? Therefore, I can't optimize gains. And people they go into it with that mindset. Well, that's just simply not true. Because again, based upon everything we've observed in the anecdote, things we've seen in research, people are capable of making maximum gains with relatively few sets. But only in the context of good programming, doing very hard sets, either close to failure, possibly even some extended sets like some of the rest pause you see me doing in here. That's where the magic happens. Okay, number one, Number two, proper exercise selection, because at the end of the day, it is hard to maximize muscle growth off of a single exercise. Again, decades of anecdote have noted this, and then stuff in the lab has noted this. You do need a couple different exercises. Hopefully exercises that work slightly different functions and angles of a muscle. So if exercise selection is correct, right? Meaning we're combining exercises that handle these things well together. And on top of that, the sets are truly hard. There is no reason having a limited time is an excuse to say you can't gain nearly maximum muscle mass. Okay? And again, as I've said, I've seen it in people in as few as 45 minutes 3 times a week. Now that is the absolute lowest extreme I would recommend, but I've seen it happen many times over the years in real life. I've seen it with clients, I've seen it in people I knew. They get results. Okay? In the context of the training is actually hard and correct. And this is why this is an important consideration, because we live in a world where not everyone is addicted to going to the gym. Their whole life doesn't revolve around it. And so if people are then promoting this idea that, well, these studies over here on these sub-maximal sets, where they're leaving all these reps in reserve, they did 20 or 30 sets and still saw more gains from it. And so therefore, if you're not spending 2 hours a day, 6 days a week in the gym, you're not maximizing muscle growth. And when that idea is promoted, it then convinces people they need a 12-hour, 14-hour a week commitment to the gym in order to make the best gains. And it's simply not true. It is because of the training style. Okay? And people who say, well, I want to make maximum gains, but I don't have that time commitment, that's where stuff like this becomes really attractive. Because one, if you can train for 3 hours instead of 12 and get the same results, because you were willing to train much, much harder, right? That is a massive time commitment benefit, especially if it's not actually costing you gains. Number one. Number two, quality of life. Now, there are conditioning benefits and other possible health benefits to the really high volumes of training. Okay, we need to be clear on that. So I don't want it to sound like, well, they don't help with conditioning, because they can. But if we're talking just about gaining muscle, gaining strength, no, it's not necessary. And at the end of the day, if recovery feels better on this other style of training, and it oftentimes will, there is also a quality of life benefit. So again, the point here is that fitting into people's lifestyle, we come over to busy professionals, not fitness professionals, busy professionals, people with busy lives, people with limited time, limited recovery. I am suggesting that it does not have to cost them gains, and that's the point. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.